Lennox, we will be ready to go right at 10:30.
Okay, you can hear me well, I hope.
Yep.
Apologize for not being there in person. I'm not feeling 100% today, so I didn't want to share with everybody. So we'll do our best here remotely. Call this meeting to order Wednesday, August 2nd of the Planning Committee for the Cothet Regional District. Welcome everybody, and we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin First Nation. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt? I see Director McCormick and Director Gisborne. Is there any discussion on the agenda? I see one hand. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. You probably can't see from your seat. It looks like we have two members of the public here, and I'm just wondering if they're looking to speak as delegations, and if so, as to which items, and then we could potentially move those items up the agenda. That's my first one. Second one is, I believe it was July 11th, our planning staff sent out a copy of the report for West Coast Fishculture, and I would like to move that item of information be added to the agenda under FYI. It's 19 pages, and I think it's pertinent to item 8.2.
Okay, I do believe we have an unregistered delegation. Am I correct in that? I'm just going to expand my screen so I can see better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have Pat Demeester here from unregistered delegation this morning.
Okay, and the second point of business is including the report. I believe we had the link included in our existing material. And Director Gisborne, are you referring to the physical copy?
Yeah, the full document, because if we get into discussion on a matter and paperwork or documents are being discussed and they're not on the agenda, that can be a bit of an issue, not just for us or for members of the public in the future that open up the agenda and go, like, what are these guys talking about?
Okay, so, and do we have that with us?
It's in everyone's emails, and I also have an extra physical copy if that helps. There you go. Yeah.
Great. Yes. Thank you. If we're okay with including that in our correspondence, everybody. Thank you.
FYI.
Yeah, under FYI.
Very good. Under FYI.
And on the first one, it looks like our delegation is here for item 8.2. So I would move that item 8.2 be dealt with right after delegations and inquiries.
Any objections from the group? Don't see any. All right, we shall do so. Thank you. Any other discussion on the agenda? All in favor? Don't see any opposed. Carried. I'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? I don't see any hands. Anybody like to move the adoption? Thank you, Director Gisborne. Seconder. Director McCormick, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All right, we will move to our unregistered delegation. Do we have Mr. Demeester there? We'll wait till the camera focuses on you so we can look. Oh, yes, Corporate Officer.
Thank you, to the Chair. We just need to allocate a time allotment for the unregistered delegation.
Yeah, so typically, Mr. Demeester, we typically give folks 10 minutes.
That sounds good.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, through the Chair. If the Assembly are okay with
that's right. So typically that's what we do, and unless any of the directors have an objection, we'll give you 10 minutes. And then have an opportunity for some questions to be posed. It's not really a debate session, it's just for any questions from the directors. So any directors have any opposition to that? Great. Okay, Mr. Demeester, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I came because of 8.2 in the agenda. I've been working as a fishing guide and a steward of wild fisheries here in Powell River for 25 years. I do fisheries consulting for the province. So when the province of British Columbia comes to Powell River, looking at fish and fish habitat, they call me. And basically we go over the watersheds that are in the district and, the different species that, we have in our watersheds here. I've been working on the Lois Lake Fish Farm for almost 20 years on the subject. I'm not anti-aquaculture, and I'll say that right now, because we do need to feed people. We have 8 billion people on the planet. And I think that it's a contentious industry within the province, but it's even more contentious when an industry goes outside of the guidelines that are laid out by the province and the federal government. So with the Lois Lake Fish Farm, you have 3 different government agencies that oversee the farm, which is the Department of Fisheries and Oceans maintains the fish and the overseeing of the production of the fish inside the pens. The Ministry of Natural Resources is the tenure holder and the part of the province that gives out the land to do the farm on, including the lake sites. And the Ministry of the Environment is the one that looks after the fish and makes sure that it's not unduly affected by having the farm in the watershed. It's very difficult to get all 3 of them at a desk and to even kind of confer on things. So this has gone on for about 3 years now. They're in court. They've been charged with an array of charges. There's actually 3 different, 2 individuals in the company have been charged. They're going to court August 29th. I see here that they have asked you to support a letter of them returning to 2015 tenure areas, which is something that they've been forced to do. They, a few years ago, moved out of their tenure and started to produce fish and build sites close to shore, which is having an effect. And the style of farm that they've opened, everything about it is illegal. The pens are illegal. The pipes going to it are illegal. They buried 8 pipes into the lake bed with an excavator when nobody was around, which was illegal. 4 of those pipes discharge illegal discharge into the lake. They're illegally discharging 10% of the effluent from the farm into the lake with no discharge permit. They've lost tens of thousands of fish into this lake. I have a little bit of a slideshow here, which we can pop through, but it shows some of the escaped rainbows. It shows our local kokanee population, and it shows our local cutthroat population. We have the largest coastal cutthroat in the world here. We're doing a 3-year study to potentially even identify them as a unique species only found in Powell River. So this farm has a history in the lake. In the 90s, they lost so many coho that they had to open the retention to coho in Lois Lake and change the regulations. It's been the early 2000s. I was part of the license agreement writing to make them start to mark the fish. So they cut off an adipose fin because it's a trophy cutthroat lake. Fish over 16 inches are protected. And they were basically escaping and they were protected because they were all over 16 inches. So now they remove an adipose fin and they've opened it. It was 4 a day for the last 15 plus years. I just this season got it open to 6 per day to help remove them from the lake. These are some of the issues that I have with the farm moving forward in such an aggressive and fast manner before they've even cleaned up the lake. They've lost tens of thousands of fish into the lake, which is a known fact. I mean, there's fishing shows. I have a company that guides the lake. I had a client get a 30-pound rainbow this year. That rainbow ate kokanee and stickleback and sculpin and the biomass of bugs that are in the lake that are meant for the local fish. There's tens of thousands of them in the lake. I'm not sure. I have some pictures here of the styrofoam. I caught a gentleman digging styrofoam out onto the beach, an employee of the farm. There were several dump truck loads of styrofoam put onto the beach, which blew into the lake. They can be found from the top end of Khartoum. Let's see if we can. There's the day that they were digging it out onto the beach, and this is not on their tenure. So this is actually the foreshore of the lake and the bottom of the lake. The lake's low at this point, as you can see. So this blew into the lake. There was actually a gentleman up at Khartoum yesterday taking pictures of it at the far end of Khartoum. It's blown up to my lake. It's blown into Frida and Horseshoe and all the way down to the dam. This styrofoam will be there for your grandchildren to see. It's on every shore and every beach. And Leyland went up and the local conservation officer made them clean up what they could, but this site is still absolutely thick and polluted with styrofoam. Every time the lake comes up, more styrofoam enters the water. There's no way to really clean it up because there's millions and millions of small styrofoam balls. As you can see, all the junk in the background, that was all illegally placed there. We had them clean that up this winter because they were off of their tenure, basically putting garbage all over the beach. This is a picture of a 10,000-year-old Ice Age kokanee that we have in our lakes. They feed our giant coastal cutthroat. This is why we have the world's largest coastal cutthroat. This is why they get so big. These kokanee are found throughout the province, but these particular ones and the relationship with the cutthroat that they have is unique to Powell River and East Vancouver Island. And our studies will show that, like I said, this could be potentially a new species of cutthroat or strain of cutthroat that's only found here in Powell River. So there's a female kokanee. These are spawning fish. These are sockeye salmon that live in our lake that run in the hundreds of thousands up the different streams that go in throughout the entire watershed. They're found in Powell, Duck, and Lois Lake watershed. So skip across here. These are our local coastal cutthroat trout. Very beautiful, very unique. People fly in from all over the world. I'm booked from now until December 1st with people coming in from Europe, Powell River, to stay here at local B&Bs. And this farm is having a massive impact on this population of fish in the lake. Skip a couple. So this is a farm rainbow that has escaped from the farm. They escape at about 3 to 5 pounds. And we catch, I think our best day last year on the water when we were sampling was probably 25 or 30 fish that wwere over 20 pounds. So we catch 50 to 100 of these fish in a day between our group. And this is one location of the lake. So the amount of them that have escaped into the lake is unfathomable, really. Here's another. And there's another. You can see they've gained quite a bit of weight since they escaped from the net pen at 16 inches or 18 inches. These, so they're having a massive impact. We don't know the biomass that they're taking from the lake, but it's obvious that they're eating a lot in the lake. There is no pellets that escape from this farm. It's not like these fish sit under the farm and eat pellets. These fish are actually eating the wild food chain that's in the lake. They stopped marking the fish illegally, which they're being charged with right now. There's a huge time frame. We have fish 30 pounds to 18 that are marked, like this one. Then we have fish for a 2-year period where they stopped marking fish that are about 18 pounds to 12 pounds that are unmarked, protected, can't be removed from the lake. They have adipose fins. So even though we know they're a farm rainbow, game warden will charge you if you kill that fish because it has an adipose fin, and that's the law. That is part of their court case being charged. They buried 7 pipes into the lake bed illegally, which I mentioned. No charges were laid for that. I can't believe a company can go. I don't know if did the video come through.
Should be at the end.
Okay, there's another farm rainbow. I'll get to the video at the end, and the illegal pipes and the excavator being in the lake, which is illegal. The floating pipes on the lake is something that is super concerning to me. I've brought it up to the navigation, like I've brought it up to Transport Canada. It's very hard to get a hold of anybody in Transport Canada. I've looked for help from the province and the federal government. They have 12 pipes strung from the mainland farm out to the pens at this point. There's no buoys, there's no lights, there's no flagging. They're black and they float on the surface. Somebody is going to get seriously hurt at this location. If nobody can agree upon the fish and the ecosystem, we should at least agree upon that these things should be marked and flagged for boaters in Lois Lake, because it's about 400 feet of pipe, 500 feet of pipe that's just floating across the lake. A couple of them are broken and swinging out into the lake, and it's definitely a hazard for boaters. They were asked, yes.
So I'm just going to interrupt you. You're at 10 minutes where we typically will give a little extra if you're sort of nearing wrapping up. So you got a few more slides. Okay.
Sure, thank you. They were asked by the province to move back their pens back to the original site 3 times in written letters from the province. They refused to do so. They kept putting fish in the pens after they were asked by Department of Fisheries and Oceans not to. And now I have had their egg permit pulled with the Ministry of the Environment. So they are no longer allowed to move fish to Powell River into the country, eggs from Washington. They're not allowed to move fish to the facility. They're allowed to harvest what's in the pens, and it's all coming to a halt. So this is why they've come to you guys asking for some support. I know that this isn't, it doesn't have weight. This letter will have a little bit of weight, but it's not a final decision as to whether they can do this or not. That's up to the 3 government agencies. And in the end here, my last thing is really, this is all a moot point because the territory that we're sitting on is Slam and First Nations, and they are 100% opposed to this farm and open net fish farming in their territory. So that will be the kill shot for this. This is just a quick little analysis of the paperwork. You can see every single thing coming out of there is over the allowable. This is from their farm. This is the small stream and the discharge that they have coming out of the farm. This was taken by the game warden and the province just not that long ago in a study, and they were over on almost everything. 14 parts in a 100 ml sample of these chloroforms is the maximum allowed. Why it says less than 1,000 per 100, I'm not sure who took these samples, but scientifically they should have been using a meter that would actually read that, because for this to be a drinking water for the future of south of town and Powell River, the chloroform has to be 0 for Health Canada, and 14% is the natural ambient in the lake, maximum allowable discharge for an operation like this. And all they could come up with is that it's less than 1,000. So I would ask you guys to not give a letter of recommendation to them until they clean up what they've done in our backyard, and till they've gone through their court case, and till the province and the federal government, we're talking in the millions of dollars worth of fines here. This isn't just a small slap on the wrist. And I don't believe this company will survive unless they go land-based. I've written letters of support for a land-based Lois Lake fish farm, even though I'm obviously here against the open net pens. So I just thought I'd bring that a little bit of awareness to the situation before, because I know it's easy just to kind of see a business and push it through without the right information. So I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to me today.
Great. Well, thank you for your presentation. We will give the directors a chance for some questions if they have any. Maybe we could get the presentation taken down. That'll help me with my view. Oh, great. Thanks. I see Director McCormick, I think.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. DeMeester, for coming here and sharing this information with us. It was certainly not included in the staff report, so it's certainly good to know. Have you been in touch with Tla'amin Nation?
Yes.
Regarding this? And we haven't seen like a formal position or anything.
I believe that their position has always been and continues to be no open net fish farming in pens in their territory. I did not get a written confirmation, but I did talk to a member of council last night who said that is still their position.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Do we see any other hands? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in today. Appears to be a lot going on. One of the concerns that shows up in the images is the waste on the beaches, and I'm wondering maybe from our staff about like shoreline cleanup, because I know we have initiatives that take place at the ocean shoreline cleanup, but so far I haven't heard of anything about lakes. And then my question for you is like the effluent discharge into the lake, and you showed up on what was it, slide 13 or something, yeah, with the 8 items. Do you believe that there is proper treatment methods available so that we don't have discharge going above it? And I don't believe it's drinking water guidelines, it's just environmental water guidelines, which they appear to be above. And you seem to be a bit of an expert on this. And I'm just wondering, would the land-based system be somewhat more viable to treat the water before getting into the Lois Lake water system?
I think that that's a good question. The part of the charges that are coming down are and part of the problem is that they're producing a lot more than their license allows them to produce as far as tonnage of fish goes. So since they're actually over the amount of fish, then it's kind of hard to regulate the discharge. I think, you know, when the government says you can have the pens over here and over here where it's 400 feet deep, and then they bring them over into 75 feet of water or 100 feet of water, that's an issue, because the biologists have come up with those areas because of flow, because of river discharge, because of the footprint will be larger from any effluent from the farm. So if they go land-based and they were actually to fall back on the numbers that they were allowed to, I think it is possible to clean the water. I mean, what I talk to biologists daily about this almost with the province and the federal government. And I believe that it is possible for them to pump up water, which I would support. Pump water from the bottom of Lois Lake where it's cold and oxygenated, bring it onto a land-based system, raise their fish, clean the water and put it back. And when they put it back, it would obviously come out the small stream that's there that they have water rights on, and they could put a fish trap there, and any fish that were escaped or the fish that have escaped would return there because that's their home stream and get caught in the fish trap. So not only would they be able to treat the water, but I think they'd be able to manage any escapement in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. DeMeester, you've raised a lot of really valuable information here that's you know, pertinent to the concerns of the community for sure. You know, we're going to be considering the request before us here. And, you know, you've mentioned that we don't have a lot of skin in this game, but we are an advocacy group for, you know, for this activity and in our community and in our watershed. So, you know, I don't have any questions for you. You've really given us a lot to think about, and I think we're going to move our item up on the agenda so you can have a listen if you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just wondering if there's any other unregistered delegations. He's shaking his head. The chair can't see, so
That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, you muted.
Next, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm using the space bar, still learning here. So I was going to ask that. I don't think we have any other unregistered delegations.
No, Chair.
Great. All right, Corporate Officer, would we move to unfinished business or right to 8.2 at this point?
Thank you through the chair. I believe the motion that Director Gisborne brought forward was to bring item 8.2 directly following delegations and inquiries.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So 8.2 would be up next, and then we would follow that with unfinished business.
Chair, you're muted.
You're muted, Jason.
I'm going to have to stop using the space bar. Thanks, you guys. Just give me a sec. I'm just scrolling down. Yeah, I don't have my split screen, so this is a lot of fun. All right, we are going to move to 8.2 on the agenda. This is a referral, provincial referral for aquaculture use amendment application for West Coast Fishculture on Lois Lake in Area C. And there is a recommendation. There's actually two parts. Should we handle them separately or together? Director Gisborne, I see your hand, I think.
Yeah, the recommendation is to support the aquaculture use amendment application with the following conditions 1 and 2. So I don't think we can really separate them out.
Right, good point.
The other option that I would be in support of is that the Cathet Regional District advise the Ministry of Forests that Cathet Regional District does not support the aquaculture use amendment application. And if it's okay at this time, I would move that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, just taking some notes. corporate officer. Obviously, we're going to add some verbiage there.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Got Gisborne and Cormack. Great discussion on the matter. I see Director Gisborne.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm moving that we do not support the application, and that's not because I don't support, fish farming or aquaculture. Even myself growing up, we used to raise trout on the farm, and absolutely we do need to feed people. But with what's going on out at that location for so long, members of this community, it's like an open secret. Everyone knows for decades that you can go out there and catch some really big fish that aren't native to the lake. But the tipping point for myself, and the reason why I don't support the application, is the Area B and Area C official community plans outlines water studies for future growth south of town. The Southern Region Water Sustainable, I can't remember the whole name of the study, but in that study, it outlines that Lois Lake is the best use or the best option for getting water for folks south of town. For getting down to, I know, into Clay's area, down around Lang Bay, and even coming back towards Black Point and coming back towards Area B. So for us, and it is part of our strategic plan, the protection of drinking water. And seeing these figures, which is in the report that has been sent out by email, and I gave a physical copy to Director McCormick, there are eight contaminants that are above the guidelines for what can be discharged into a lake that are in some cases orders of magnitude above what is allowed. And to me, that's a big problem, because I see that as our future drinking water for future growth south of town. And when a company is discharging that kind of effluent into the lake, that puts future burden on the regional district if we want to go down that route, which our OCP says is the future of that development. So if the application was different, I could be in support. But the way I see it is, if we support this application, it's like rewarding bad behavior. If the whole thing was cleaned up and there wasn't these issues with effluent discharge above the guidelines going into the lake, I would feel differently about it, and I'm sure members of the community would. But at this time, my answer is no. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I see any other hands, Director McCormick? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I feel a little uncomfortable with accepting information sort of secondhand. I have no question for Mr. Demeester is absolutely speaking accurately in what he has observed and experienced. But I kind of wish we had been able to do a little more investigating into this prior to the report coming to us. In any case, I do support the recommendation not to support this application, because I truly believe there's nothing more important in our life than clean, safe drinking water. I've said that at this table, I don't know how many times, and continue to say it. And so, although it maybe isn't in our purview to monitor the quality of the water, that's probably the Ministry of Environment that would do that. I think it is important that we take note of what has been found and include this information in our consideration. So yeah, I will support the recommendation, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just reading the report, I can see in writing here the Land Act amendment applications aimed at rectifying the trespass that has been the recent cause of attention. But I got to echo the other directors' comments that there's a lot more attention that's been directed at this operation. The trespass issue, I understand, is to get them back on solid footing as far as where the operation exists. But I do agree that it almost seems like telling them you've done all these things that need improvement, but as long as you get back in the right area, we're good. And it's sort of almost an endorsement from the QRD. But I'd like maybe staff, I see Ms. Rodden on the line here. are there any negative ramifications for us not endorsing this? And what are, you know, as far as your assessment? Yes.
Through the chair, it's the board's purview to make a decision on whether to support or not support. Staff have reviewed the application and had communication with the protection officer at Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and the resource officer at Ministry of Forests. And there's compliance and enforcement action underway by multiple agencies, federal and provincial, and it is the province's recommendation for the applicant to work through the different compliance matters. One of them is amending the tenure so that the infrastructure is within the tenure area, and that's all this application is about. But there's multiple other requirements of the applicant that they are working through.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I see Director Doubt.
I understand the delegation we've had and their point of view on the violations that are going on, and damage that's caused, but my understanding is we're working right now on a request from the government asking to approve a certain portion of a plan that's supposed to repair part of that, at least. And I'm not sure what will happen if we don't support their proposed solution. Does the staff have any idea what the repercussions would be of the government not supporting the proposed change?
Ms. Rodden?
Thank you, Chair. The province refers the application out to multiple agencies. Local government is only one of those agencies that would also have gone to the Tla'amin Nation, the Seashell Nation, because it is an overlap territory between those two First Nations. It's gone to the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So they collect the responses from all the agencies that receive the referral, and then they make a decision based on that. So there's a lot more that they weigh over and above the regional district's resolution on the application.
Okay, thank you. Just waiting for the screen to go back so I can see the other directors here.
Chair, I've got my hand up.
Yes, I thought you might, Director Brander.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe staff could clarify something for me. So through the chair, I'd like to ask Ms. Rodden, you mentioned modifying the tenure to fit the situation, but I'm a little bit confused. I guess I kind of read it two ways: either modify the tenure to fit the situation or force them to go back to what the tenure was so that they move the equipment back to the area that was originally allowed. If you could just clarify that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Rodden.
Yes, I think I'll defer to Julia. She knows the details of this one better than I.
Okay, Ms. Dykstra.
Thank you. Through the chair. The amendment application is to move the infringing infrastructure back to their original tenure from 2015. So this is not an amendment to the province to make legal what they've been doing since 2015. This is merely to require them to move back to their original tenure from 2015.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, can I follow up?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. It makes a bit more sense to me. I'm not opposed to the motion that we have on the table. I'm just a little confused. Or I guess I wish I knew where it was going. Ms. Rodden has commented that this is only one portion of a process. And I guess I agree to, I don't want to say I disagree with them having to be moved back into their original tenure, area, but essentially what we're saying is that these letters don't go far enough as far as we're concerned, is what I'm kind of hearing. So therefore, I guess I'm okay with voting in favor of the motion that we have on the table. I guess I wish I knew I wish I had a bigger picture of all of the steps that were being taken to remedy the situation, but we're only looking at one small step here. I guess that's it. I just had a little confusion there. I appreciate it being cleared up. Thank you.
No, I had some of the same questions. I see Director Elliott, is that?
No,
McCormick. Sorry, Sir McCormick.
Yeah, thanks. Just a very quick question to staff. Do we have to put a reason for not supporting it in our motion? Like, does a reason go forward? Is that typical? We don't support it because of failure to comply with various regulations or whatever. So my question to staff.
Officer, maybe?
I can answer that question.
Okay, Ms. Rodden, thank you.
Yeah, you can simply say does not support so in that case, the motion that's on the table would end at after electoral area C. So it wouldn't include with the following conditions.
Okay.
Or you could say does not support based on the following concerns and state what your specific concerns are.
Okie doke. Well, it's an interesting discussion. When I look at the first part of the recommendation, it sort of infers to me that if they move their operations to the 2015 area, that complies with the compliance and enforcement process. I was a little confused as well. And now that we've got this other information, that's only one part of the ongoing saga. It adds to the puzzle. I just want to see here if we have any other questions. Any hands? Yes, Director Gisborne, I'm looking.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and big thanks to the staff and the directors. Yes, everyone I think is correct in that this application is coming to us from Ministry of Forests. And that's it, just Ministry of Forests. We're not being asked by DFO at this time. We're not being asked by Ministry of Environment. And as has been, brought up, they have multiple compliance and enforcement issues from different ministries and different jurisdictions. And right now we're getting a correspondence request from one of those ministries, which is Ministry of Forests in this case. So I'm happy with the motion the way it is. It just says we don't support it. If we wanted to get into all the reasons why we don't support it, we might end up having a huge list and then asking for more information and contacting DFO. And I think that's probably just a bit too onerous on everyone. And it really, if they were having a compliance issue with, say, just Ministry of Forests because they were outside of their tenure and this was to try and help get back into compliance and it was just a little issue, I could see myself supporting their application. But because there's so many issues and ministries involved, and if Ministry of Forests gets a response that says, well, some are in support and some are opposed, and it'll be, the final decision is up to them. But I think for us, we have to take into account the community impact that it's having, because we are the first line, we are the local government. And we have concerns, in my opinion, with solid waste management, shoreline protection, water quality, and then the list goes on and on. But rather than adding all those issues to the motion, I think we just leave the motion as we do not support it. And I think that sends a clear enough message to the Ministry of Forests. And who knows, in the future, we might get more letters from other ministries about this, but this is just the one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, just looking for any other hands. Mr. Brander, Director Brander.
Sorry, I know I've spoken, but I guess my only concern with supporting the motion that we have is if that would make it appear as though we are endorsing the fact that the fish farm has strayed beyond its tenure or its allowable tenure. But I mean, I guess if we could put words into the motion that would state that, no, we are not in support of, the fact that they have strayed beyond. But it's that this letter doesn't go far enough. There's many reasons. I'm not really sure how that would be worded, but I just felt I had to say what my concern was. I'm still in support of the motion as it is.
Okay. Appreciate everybody's comments. I think it is time to put this to a vote. Do we all understand the new wording? I think it's pretty straightforward that we do not support this recommendation. All right, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor of the amended motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. All right, let me just keep getting organized here. We're going to go back to regular programming here. Go to unfinished business. I do see we have on the agenda 5.1 proposed engagements with proposed options for the Area B OCP changes regarding density. There is a recommendation to proceed with public engagement for Area B and some background information and options. Do I have a mover? Or is this, I guess, under unfinished business? Is that how we handle this, corporate officer? Discussion first, or?
Through the chair.
Yes, Keo.
It's at your pleasure. If the assembly agrees to have maybe a 10-minute discussion, they can debate maybe where they want to go so that they get it correct. Or if the promoter of the notice of motion wants to make a recommendation, he can do so as well.
Okay, well, it looks like Director Gisborne wishes to do so.
I would actually be very happy with a 10-minute discussion around the table, and then we can figure out what we want to do so we don't end up putting the cart before the horse. And also, when I came in, I believe our staff had a little presentation on floor area ratios, which is one of the items. So if it's okay with the assembly, I would love to see what staff have for us.
Great, I think that's a good plan, and I was going to say that we had some extra information. So Ms. Rodden, are you prepared for that?
Yes, I am.
All right, go right ahead.
Okay, so Julia Dykstra and myself have reviewed the materials and the options that are contained in the agenda and prepared this presentation, which is a bit of a review of what those proposed options are. Next slide, please. So for clarity, staff's comments relate to the three options that are on page 17 of the agenda package, if you have a paper copy, or page 17 if you are looking at the PDF version of the agenda. Or if you're in HTML, you would click on the proposed options hyperlink under 5.1. So staff has several comments regarding the recommended options. First of all, the proposed options fall outside the scope of content for an official community plan. Floor area ratios are established through a zoning bylaw, and the proposed options do not accurately reflect how floor area ratio is calculated by planners, architects, and other professionals in Canada. Building coverage ratio, which is a term used in options 2 and 3, is not a term used by any jurisdiction in Canada or the United States. And as far as staff could determine from our research, building coverage ratio is a term used in Tokyo, Japan, and in Korea. Next slide, please. So in BC, the Local Government Act provides a range of tools for local governments to regulate land use and development. Those are official community plans, zoning bylaws, subdivision and servicing bylaws, and building bylaws. And under the Local Government Act, the content for an official community plan is set out under section 473, and the content for zoning bylaws is set out under section 479. So it's under section 479 C3 that identifies that the siting, size, and dimensions of buildings and other structures and uses that are permitted on the land is content for a zoning bylaw. And so zoning is the tool that's used for establishing size and dimensions of buildings, and total floor area and floor area ratio are two of the approaches for regulating the size of buildings. Next slide, please. So in 2020, Cawthron Regional District contracted the Arlington Group to work with us to develop a feasibility study on land use and development regulatory options. And in that work and in that report, there was an assessment of the Cawthron Regional District's existing legislative framework, and there was an inventory of the options available under the Local Government Act. And the study recommended public consultation on the variety of regulatory options available under the Local Government Act in areas A, B, and C. And then in 2022, the Cawthron Regional District contracted the Arlington Group again, together with Ecoplan International, who worked with staff to roll out public engagement in areas A, B, and C. And through that engagement process, the predominant response we heard in all three electoral areas was that the existing level of regulation is limited, but no change is needed. Next slide, please. So the Cawthron Regional District's existing legislative framework includes zoning bylaws that regulate for maximum total floor area. And this is different than floor area ratio. So total floor area means the total area of all floors of all stories contained within the exterior walls of a building or structure. That's the definition from the Cawthron Regional District's Myrtle Pond zoning bylaw. And in this zoning bylaw, a maximum total floor area regulates the size of accessory buildings and structures to a total maximum of 15% of the parcel area. This regulation is intended to minimize the building footprint on a parcel and protect the amount of open space. Total floor area regulations have also been established in the Cawthron Regional District's Traff Road zoning bylaw, the Lund Watershed zoning bylaw, and the Texada Island Watershed zoning bylaw. Next slide, please.
So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is also known as floor space ratio and is calculated from the relationship between the total amount of usable floor area and the total area of the lot on which the building stands. FAR or FSR, directly from the City of Powell River zoning bylaw, means a figure obtained when the gross floor area on a lot is divided by the area of the lot. As an example in the photo, this house has 2,000 square feet of usable floor area, and the lot is 6,000 square feet. Therefore, the FAR is 0.3. An FAR of 1 would mean a 6,000 square foot house on a 6,000 square foot lot. A typical application of this ratio is in urban areas where land is limited. It requires landowners to provide house plans and a legal survey of their lot prior to any construction, and it's used in conjunction with a building bylaw and a building department. Density structures versus dwellings. This example in the photo is a high-rise of a residential apartment building that has a density of 3.4 FAR. It's also true that this building has a density of 12 dwelling units per 10,000 square feet. Density is a relative calculation, and the calculations of FAR does not regulate the number of dwelling units. Sometimes in urban areas, as in the example that I provided from the City of New Westminster zoning bylaw, density in the regulation provides an either or density to provide the developer leeway in distributing usable space or dwelling units. For example, the maximum permitted base density must not exceed housing units, 30 per net acre, or a floor space ratio or floor area ratio of 1.2. Just going to switch over to a video here that is going to help also share some more information with the committee.
Hi, everyone. I'm George Fontaine, and I'm an architect. Today, I want to talk about floor area ratio. This is a basic zoning concept that you're going to need to know if you're ever going to be looking into the zoning on a property, which zoning is the set of rules that are going to determine what you can build on a property, okay? Floor area ratio, also known as FAR, is one of the basic premises of zoning, okay? First thing I really want to tell everyone is this is pronounced FAR, not FAR, okay? Professionals always say FAR. Everybody at city planning at the Department of Buildings, architects, okay? So FAR, not FAR. All right, so what is floor area? It's a proportion that determines how many square footage a building can be. All right, so you take the lot area multiplied by the FAR equals your buildable square footage, okay? The buildable square footage is also referred to as your development rights. Development rights is a broad term that is to say your legal rights to develop a property, okay? And the magnitude to which you can develop, all right? So this is also sometimes referred to as air rights. Air rights is a pretty general term that people use. Sometimes people use it to mean different ways, but it basically means what you can build is your air rights, okay? These things can be sold to neighboring properties or they can be built on your own property. So let's just run through an example here, okay? Let's say I have a lot area that's 50 by 100. I'm in New York City. Most common lot size here is 25 by 100. So maybe you have two lots or a double-sized lot. Okay, that gives you 50 by 100. That's 5,000 square feet, okay? Now the zoning, based on your zoning district, will give you an FAR, okay? So we'll look at two examples. So if I was in New York and I've got an FAR of 1, that means I take 5,000 square feet, multiply it by 1, and I get 5,000. So what does that mean? That means I can build a 5,000 square foot building, okay? So you can do a 1-story building at 5,000 square feet. You could do a 2-story building at 2,500 square feet, but the maximum square footage for the building is 5,000 square feet, okay? If you have an FAR of 2.2, if you're an R6 in New York City, okay, it's 5,000 square feet. That's the lot area multiplied by 2.2. The FAR, that gives us 11,000, okay? Once again, I can do maybe a 3-story building at 3,667 square feet per floor, or I can do a 6-story building at 1,833 square feet per floor. But either way, all right, the whole building adds up to 11,000 square feet. That's the zoning square footage, all right? The last example would be an FAR of 10. Okay, let's say you're an R10 in New York City, all right? That's 5,000 square feet times 10, 50,000 square feet, which results in a building of 50,000 square feet. So that's 10 stories at 5,000 square feet per floor, 20 stories at 2,500 square feet per floor, okay? And that's basically how you determine the size of the building with regards to square footage. Now, there's lots of other zoning codes to take into consideration. I always tell people, zoning is a balancing act, okay? You have a lot of codes that have to be in equilibrium in order to determine what you can build. So it's not just your floor area ratio. This is one of the most important basic concepts that you need to know. And generally, when we look at a new property development, we start with the floor area ratio first. That's usually the first thing we look at, but there's a million other things. There's height restrictions, setback restrictions, yard restrictions, you know, all sorts of lot coverage, all sorts of different things that are going to affect the actual size and shape of a building. But with this basic
video stopped.
That was pretty much the end.
Okay, good.
Anyways, yeah, that's the end of our presentation.
Okay, very informative. Thank you. All right, we are in the discussion phase now, so I think we'll see Director Gisborne. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I got a frog in my throat. There, I think I got him. I'd like to thank staff for that video presentation. It helps, you know, the assembly understand what FAR is all about. I won't say FAR because it's floor area ratio. And staff is also correct that BCR, you don't really see too often in North America. It's actually becoming fairly new in North America when it comes to planning. And it is very entrenched and popular in Japan. Right now, we have a housing crisis across North America, across Canada, across the United States. Meanwhile, in Japan, they actually do use BCR. They have a lot of people, very little space. But yet their housing crisis in Japan is actually the opposite. In Japan, they're giving away 8 million homes for free because they have overdeveloped. They have created a system which was not overly restrictive. This idea of building coverage ratio actually came about from discussions about agricultural land reserve. As we saw in that video about lot size, FAR, floor area ratio, if you have a FAR of 1, you can cover your entire lot with structure. Or you can have half the lot with with 2 stories. That is a useful tool in an urban area. In a rural area, one of the questions that came about when discussing agricultural land reserve was the province said that you can have 5,000 square feet of floor area ratio for a house. So that meant you could have one 5,000 square foot rancher, or you could make it 2 stories, but it can only be 2,500 square feet. The reason that sparked greater discussion is the purpose of the AOLR is to protect the agricultural land. Now that we're looking at rural areas, not just the agricultural land reserve, and that's why this resolution talks about rural residential land, it's about protecting the natural environment. It's about having emphasis on the natural environment. The proposal from May was to to change the OCP to allow as many dwellings as Vancouver Coastal Health will allow. That causes some issues, in my opinion, with Electoral Area B. Last year, I think it was March, I wanted to try and update the zoning bylaws. Unfortunately, the OCP is quite restrictive and wouldn't really allow the flexibility to change the zoning bylaws. With this current change or proposed change from May, we could then change those zoning bylaws, but really the OCP is the guiding document. And I'd very much like to thank the staff for pointing out 473 of the Local Government Act, which states the official community plan must include statements and map designations for the area covered by the plan respecting the following. And you go down that list and floor area ratios and building coverage ratios aren't there. They're not under 473. However, that being said, 474 says an official community plan may include the following: policies of the local government relating to social needs, social well-being, and social development. I think the principle of residential flexibility falls under that category because we are in the housing crisis, and that's why we're doing the updated housing needs assessment. The other reason why I think 474 is important is D. OCP plan may include the following: policies of the local government relating to the preservation, protection, restoration, and enhancement of the natural environment, its ecosystems, and biological diversity. We've all seen our OCPs. We've all gone through our OCPs. They have policies in there that sometimes you don't see in any other OCPs because we have a unique community. We also have very limited regulations. We have very limited zoning bylaws. But the main purpose of what I'm proposing is that we go to the public with public engagement options to update the official community plan. And I would be happy to see it go before the public to say either option 1 is no change, option 2 is what was brought forward in May. But then I would also like to see an option of floor area ratio policy and BCR, building coverage ratio, which I think would make us leaders when it comes to housing and protecting the natural environment. If those policies get adopted into our OCP based on the public feedback, we can then update the zoning bylaws that Area B does have to be in compliance. But the other thing it does, and this is something I learned over the last term, often developers will look to develop in Area B where there's no zoning. And at first they think they can do whatever they want. But then they need to get insurance, they need to get a mortgage, and they need to get something called a letter of comfort from the regional district that says that their development is compliant with our policies. My thoughts are if we have building coverage ratio or floor area ratio in our OCP, it can help guide developers do the development that is in line with our community objectives. And I think that would be done, at the beginning with public consultation of policies for our official community plans. And that's why, first thought, I see floor area ratio. Those are quite common in zoning bylaws, a little bit in OCPs. But if we really want to be progressive, I think BCR is the way to go, because we are seeing it used in other countries around the world. It's being successful. And under 474 of the Local Government Act, I think we can put it into our OCP. And I think it can really enable residential flexibility without overburdening the natural environment of our community. And one other last point, in my submission, I had put down that the BCR and floor area ratio options could be for residential use only. And I'm thinking once again about ALR, because we have lots of activities in the rural area where, a barn gets built or a workshop gets built or some structure gets built, but it's not being used for residential use. It's not got the septic and the drinking water hookups. And we're dealing with a housing issue. So I think having you can cover your lot in so much percentage, and that's just a policy from our OCP. And then the areas of Area B that already have the zoning bylaws, we can then start updating to be compliant with the policies of our OCP, because the province updated that legislation that we can just change the zoning bylaw to be compliant with our OCP policies. So that's the request, is to go forward to the public with options to update the OCP. And I think that will also help us resolve the challenge that we have right now, where in May, the board instructed the staff to, do public engagement or public participation about a draft zoning bylaw, but the draft zoning bylaw didn't get first and second reading. So we're kind of in a rock and a hard place where, we've told the staff, okay, go engage with the public on something that we didn't do first and second reading on. So that's why I'm pushing this very progressive item. I would be happy to bring forward a video to the assembly, but I didn't think that I should, and maybe I can just send it out by email. Okay, I want to hear everyone else.
Yeah, so do I. Thank you, Dr. Gisborne. Anybody else want to comment here in the discussion? Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, probably for staff. The recommendation is not about floor space ratios or any of that. It is about proceeding to public engagement with options. And so my question is this: there was an opportunity a while back for Area B to agree to zoning, amendments that would then go forward after first and second reading to then a public hearing, an opportunity for public comment in any case. And that was agreed to in areas A and C, but not Area B. So my question is, since that was turned down by the committee for Area B, is this not kind of revisiting the same thing, but without going through the process of bylaw amendment? I might ask that as a question.
CAO, I see your, or
through the chair, staff would need some direction. I glance at the proposal in front of us. It's not detailed enough. I know that Director Gisborne has expressed what he would like to see, but we would have to get maybe a subsequent motion as to what the details are, as well as that motion of some sort to go to public engagement. But right now, as it stands, staff do not have any direction to go to public engagement on anything.
Thank you. If I might ask a follow-up, yes. Then, I'd like to know, I guess, since the zoning amendments were not approved, to go forward for Area B, and now there's a recommendation to go forward with public consultation, perhaps the planning manager could say how that opportunity for public engagement was turned down. Is it appropriate then to go with a different way of getting to public engagement without that bylaw?
Yeah, and I had some of the same concerns and questions around this. Ms. Rodden, do you have any ability to clarify if we're on the right path here?
Through the chair, I think I'm understanding where Director McCormick's question is coming from, and staff too have looked at the resolutions from the May board meeting, and there is a recommendation on the books that was supported by all directors for endorsing the proposed amending bylaws for areas A, B, and C, and for giving consideration for first and second reading, and for engaging with the public on those amending bylaws. But then when the bylaws were considered, only the amending bylaws for the Area A and the Area C OCPs were given first and second reading, and the amending bylaws for the Area B OCP was not given first and second reading. So that's where it sits. But that being said, if staff had direction to engage on the amending bylaw, we can build that into our plans for rolling out the other engagement. And in fact, it's not like, you can engage with the public before first and second reading on a proposed amending bylaw or after first and second reading. It really doesn't matter.
Good.
So staff would be prepared to do that if given direction to do that.
Okay, so I think, thank you for that. And I think everybody's been clear that clarity on the goal to then take to the public is what we're trying to achieve here. So, maybe Director Gisborne, you went down a path here of sort of clarifying this, and I appreciate that. The options of no change, the May proposal, and then I can't remember how you worded the third option, but I think that's maybe what we're talking about here is clarifying. I don't know if you're prepared to amend this, recommendation or make a motion on that now, or you want to bring something back. I do think we're getting there. I hope we are.
Yes. And thank you for Ms. Rodden for clarifying. I got a copy of the minutes, and this is where I think we've gotten into the challenge is the first and second reading of the draft zoning bylaw was defeated, but earlier in that meeting, a motion was passed that we endorse the bylaw, we propose amending the bylaw, and that staff be directed to hold a public information meeting in Electoral Area B to present the proposed bylaw and staff feedback from the public. So that's where I think we've kind of, as a committee and an assembly, put staff in an awkward position where we've passed a resolution that said, hey, go and engage with the public, but the board turned down first and second reading of the bylaw, which really shouldn't prevent the public engagement, but it really makes that conversation awkward with the public as, well, area A passed, but why did area B get defeated? And what I'm proposing today is options, and I can happily amend the motion. I had worded the proposal in such a way that any other director with any other ideas could put some options forward, but if it's just me, I'm happy to. So number one, no change. So that's we leave the OCP the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Option two is updating the bylaw with the may change, which was proposed. So that one's all done. The third option is essentially the may proposal, but with a policy for floor area ratio. And then option four is the may version, but with BCR policy. I hear pens.
Yeah. Everybody's scribbling there, but
and it's a very, I know BCR it's a very kind of new thing that's made its way across the pond, and I'm starting to hear some other jurisdictions talking about it, because, and I think it really makes sense in a rural area, because like the priority in the natural environment is the natural environment. And one of the questions I always heard from farmers was, well, if I can build a 5,000 square foot house, but it doesn't matter, like the floor space is the same, whether it's 1 story or 2 story, then why don't I just do one big rancher? Because it's the amount of square footage. And then the farmers go, but I thought we were trying to protect the land. And that is one of like those kind of mental conundrums. And I think if we take a look instead at building coverage ratio, it's a lot easier for us to kind of keep an eye on, because when you look at floor area ratios, it's number of floors. And without things like building permits or a lot more local government understanding of what's going on in the house or around the house, how do we know how many floors are in the house? Like that's not easy for us to do in a community where you've got the building permits and you have the inspections. You can really keep track of how many floors are actually inside the structure. When I thought about the BCR option, I actually brought up the regional district's QRD IMAP, which is an amazing tool. And I actually went, in certain areas and started drawing the little lines around the house. And I went, oh yeah, this house is under 5,000 square feet of lot size coverage. So I didn't even need to know how tall it was.
Okay.
But and that way I was able to, in the inverse, understand how much land was still undeveloped and kind of being used for the natural environment. So those are the 4 options I think we could talk to the public about. And over the last couple of years, I've talked to residents, a lot of farmers about BCR. And so far I've had very positive responses, and it's an interesting thing. And it seems to be kind of taking root.
Okay. Maybe on this subject, because it is an interesting subject, maybe back to our planning staff about BCR. You've told us isn't really used here. Is there any impact on, if that were to be the decision, could staff sort of facilitate that, sort of being the leaders? If you know what I'm getting at, is this problematic to sort of implement that ratio, or is this an established methodology?
Through the chair. I think staff is confused by the options for floor space ratio and building coverage ratio.
Okay.
Because we don't understand what the problem is that the director is trying to fix. Our presentation set out how we use total floor area to minimize the size of building footprint and protect the amount of open space. What I'm hearing the director say is that's what his objective is, and is to protect the amount of open space. And I just think that total floor area with a maximum lot coverage, like we're already doing in our zoning bylaws, is perhaps a better approach. I'm also confused. I think staff is confused about what these options are in response to. So when staff brought forward the amending bylaws for areas A, B, and C OCPs in May, that was based on a year of research, and it was responding to our housing needs assessment and the community engagement that identified that accessory dwelling units are an important rental housing option in our region, and that we had an inconsistent policy approach between our OCPs in how accessory dwelling units were treated and how secondary suites were defined. And so those amending bylaws directly respond to the findings of our housing needs assessment and the findings of our research, where we were looking at all of our existing legislative framework. And so those bylaws are providing the flexibility for people to have an accessory dwelling unit, not multiple units. Those OCP amending bylaws do not suggest a change from rural residential or suburban residential to multifamily residential. All they are doing is providing flexibility for people to have an accessory dwelling unit that they can rent or provide for a family member or a caregiver. This is what we heard from the community that they want. And that's an allowable accessory use. So we've done the research on those options. We've presented the amending bylaws, whether they have been given first and second reading or not. Staff are totally comfortable going to the community and talking about those options. But these options for floor area ratio and building coverage ratio, we would have to do more research, and we would have to understand what problem is trying to be fixed with these tools. Because generally they're applied in urban areas with limited land. We're trying to maximize the number of dwelling units on smaller lots. And we're in a reverse scenario in the rural areas. We have larger lots. And let's be honest, people don't have a lot of money to build big houses. You don't see very many 5,000 square foot houses. You know, people are pretty modest in Powell River as a whole. So staff need direction. We need to understand what it is. What's the problem you're trying to fix? And then we can help flesh out what the tools are. And we'd have to do more work, and that would affect the other work we're doing. So, yeah. Sorry if I went on too long.
No, that's good. That's an honest assessment of what the questions are. We've had I'm just looking at our screen here. I gotta see.
Director Brander.
Oh yes, thank you, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate a lot of the comments that Ms. Rodden just made there. I just want to bring us back. I'm going to be repeating a few things what she said, but I just want to bring attention to it that we originally brought forward this request to staff to have changes made to the OCP to have greater continuity across the OCPs and to allow more flexibility for homeowners. I feel that the changes that the staff originally suggested do this and do it in a very clear way. I would prefer to see the original motion that was suggested by staff to be brought back to this table for reconsideration. The one that failed the first and second readings of the amending bylaws. As was mentioned, zoning bylaws could be brought in to achieve the desired options at a later date if so needed. But right now, we wanted continuity, we wanted flexibility. What staff came back with gives us continuity, gives us flexibility. And I don't see any reason right now to go beyond that. Staff has made a strong case for not following up on FAR and BCR at this point, and I'm inclined to listen to staff. So I'm a little, I guess, uncomfortable making these comments right now because we've been speaking for, I guess, 25 minutes and we have no motion on the floor. So I kind of held off for the longest period of time, but I felt I had to weigh in at some point.
Okay, Director Gisborne, we need to be brief on this one.
I'll be brief on this one. I have good news. Very good news, because the current Area B official community plan allows secondary suites on the properties mentioned. So what we heard from staff was that the proposal in May was to allow secondary suites in Area B's OCP, but Area B's OCP already has that. I know Area C's OCP didn't have it. So that then makes me confused, because then why go through the work of changing it if secondary suites are already allowed? The problem I'm trying to solve is we have a housing crisis because historically North American land use restrictions have been very restrictive, typically one dwelling. And we are seeing very large houses being built in Area B. The housing needs assessment stated that many people in our community are overhoused, as in their houses are bigger than what they need. When I read the May OCP plan proposal, it said the maximum number of dwellings will be determined by what Vancouver Coastal Health allows. I'd asked, does that mean that as long as VCH says it's okay, you can build as many as VCH will allow? And what I'd heard was, yes, that's the case. When I hear that, that to me indicates that we have gone from a very restrictive housing policy. We've swung the pendulum in the other direction to be very open to housing. And that's what gives me concern, because government, not just local government, but all government tends to swing on a pendulum from one extreme to the other. And I've taken a look at these issues for a long time, and I want to try and find balance. And I think floor area ratio, but also BCR, which does exist in rural areas. Floor area ratio is a policy the provincial government has implemented and introduced on agricultural land reserves for the purpose of protecting the land. So it's currently being used province-wide on rural land. The proposal that I'm putting forward is to try and find balance in our official community plan while creating flexibility for the property owner so that they can have not just a secondary suite, but they might have a third or a fourth, or maybe they renovate their house into a rooming house, or they put a couple of suites in it. And that's all still controlled by Vancouver Coastal Health and the BC Building Code. What I am trying to solve is Area B is right on the boundary. We have high development pressure. And if we swing from one extreme to the other, we might not find our balance. That's why I'm proposing options. That's why I didn't support the May proposal, because the way I understood it is you can have as many dwellings as you want as long as VCH allows it. Okay. To me, that is swinging the pendulum too far the other way. So I have put forward 4 options. And if you wish me to make the motion, I will happily do so.
CAO.
And I will also work with staff if they need me.
Okay, thank you. CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I picked up on what Director Gisborne was saying about as many houses as you wish if VCH allows it. I would like the manager of planning services to explain if indeed that is the case, because my understanding is VCH has the standards of how much you can build on a property based on being able to provide potable water and having sufficient sewer or septic systems. And that in itself is also overarched by what type of housing categorization your property is located on. So to that degree, I don't think you can build as much as you want on any property. And the other thing is, if we use that video example of 5,000 square feet and you want to fill the whole thing, you're going to have water or sewer to the property line, and that's going to be very cost onerous. So I'd just like to have so explain if there is limitations to this idea that you can have as many as you want, and whether that or not is indeed true.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question, Mr. Auden. Can you maybe clarify for us?
Yes. So currently, the regional district has 5 zoning bylaws. Within those zoning bylaw areas, we can regulate density. And in most of those zoning areas, we are regulating density to 1 dwelling per parcel, single family residential neighborhoods. Some of them allow for secondary suite. And outside of zoning areas, we have no ability to regulate density. However, all of our OCPs recommend density to 1 dwelling per however many hectares, depending on the which land use, which residential designation you're within. So nothing we're talking about is going to change that fact. Okay. Vancouver Coastal Health, they have authority to ensure that water supply systems meet potable water standards set by the province. And MODI has requirements, and other provincial agencies have requirements, BC Housing, Consumer Services for building code, et cetera, but that's all provincial authority. It's outside our scope of control. And yeah, adding floor area ratio or building coverage ratio is not going to change that fact.
Okay, thank you.
And none of our policies, none of our existing policies, and none of our policies that are in our proposed amending bylaws from May, none of them promote an unlimited number of houses on properties. It's a single family dwelling emphasis. Accessory dwelling units would be a recommended, like, accessory use.
Okay, I think I saw the CAO's hand up there.
Thanks, Chair. I think Ms. Rodden just answered the part of my question that I had originally asked for, and that was that it wasn't as many as you wanted.
Right.
Or excuse me, as many as VCH would allow, which would then be somehow subjected to an unlimited amount.
All right. Well, we've had a good discussion here. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, no, I'm a little confused because I pulled up the May proposal. The policy that was being changed for, oh wait, I'm looking at Lund. but it's the same one for area B. Let me just scroll down here. Area A. There's a big staff report. Here we go. Here we go. A residential dwelling is permitted on all land designated low density residential. The maximum number of dwellings or service buildings per parcel is based on proof of water and sewer servicing that meets provincial standards. That policy that was proposed in May was to replace the policy that read, a single family dwelling is permitted on all land designated low density residential. The maximum number of dwellings is one dwelling per lot up to 1 hectare in area plus one dwelling for each additional 1 hectare of land. So the way I read that, and this is where I'm confused now, is the existing OCP policy says 1 dwelling per hectare on low density residential. You can also have a secondary suite. The proposed change in May was the maximum number of dwellings or service buildings per parcel is based on proof of water and sewer servicing that meets provincial standards. And I'll tell you right now in Area B, there are many parcels that aren't within a zoning bylaw that have multiple dwellings, some up to a dozen, and they are compliant with the provincial standards for water and sewer. If I even know of one property where they have a large septic holding tank, they don't have a field, but they have it pumped out regularly, and that's compliant with Vancouver coastal health regulations. So that's where I see policy as being too flexible and too supportive of developers who may want to put in 10 units or 12 units or 15 units. And as long as they've got the water and sewer approval from Vancouver Coastal Health, they may be able to come to us and say, hey, am I developing consistent with the OCP policy? Right now, our OCP says 1 dwelling per hectare for low density residential. But if our policy said the maximum number of dwellings is based on proof of water and sewer servicing that meets provincial standards, that's where I see the pendulum going very far from one side to the other. And I would like to see a policy that tries to bring us to the middle where we can have some balance. And we do that with public engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? We've gone round and round here. Oh, I see Ms. Dykstra. Thank you. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I just asked if I could be heard, so that clarifies it. Just wanted to share for the committee what Director Gisborne was referring to from the mayor. Since I'm assuming you are wondering what we talked about in May, I just wanted to highlight for the directors at this committee that Director Gisborne has read out the proposed section 2323. And as a staff member who speaks with the public regularly, I let them know that the policies are all read together. They are not individualized, and you can't have one without the other. So I just wanted to make it clear to this committee that 2324 of the low density residential designation is recommending a principal use of a residential dwelling, not multiple dwellings. Just thought I would provide that for the committee at this meeting.
All right, thanks for that clarification. It's good information. I guess it begs the question, where are we at? We have a recommendation in front of us.
No.
Corporate officer.
Thank you, through the chair.
Right, we haven't got it yet.
We do not currently have a motion on the floor. We had discussion, but
right. Thank you.
There's the proposed motion that was referred from the July 5th committee meeting, but there's nothing currently on the floor. Okay.
Director McCormick.
Thank you. I have a question perhaps for our corporate officer procedurally. If we were to revisit the May recommendation, would it have to be someone on the prevailing side of that motion that would have to bring forward reconsideration?
Sorry, if I may, through the chair, for
yes.
which?
The motion that was defeated in May, to reconsider that motion, does that have to be proposed by a member of the committee who voted with the prevailing side, in other words, voted against it in May?
That's correct. Yeah, if I may, through the chair,
Yes.
if a director wished to make a motion to reconsider a motion that was defeated at the May meeting, it would have to be somebody who voted in the minority. So
The minority, the majority.
Prevailing.
Prevailing side would be against.
through the chair.
And it was also supposed to be done at the subsequent meeting too.
So Chair, here's my dilemma. I would like to bring back that recommendation from May. However, I voted on the side that did not prevail in that meeting, so I'm not able to do that. But I would like to hear perhaps from the directors, including yourself, who voted against the recommendation, of whether you would support reconsidering it.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, for myself, I was listening to this desire from Area B to have these options, and we've talked a lot about them, so I won't go through them again. And so at that time, I thought it was fair to allow the director to explore those topics and take them to his folks in the area. So that's why I voted at the time. Yes, Director Gisborne.
Yes, the other thing I'll remind the Assembly, we've heard from our manager of planning that the staff can still move forward with public engagement, whether there has been first and second reading or not. I believe that's what I'd heard earlier, that we can do first and second reading either before public engagement or after public engagement. So the resolution that we had passed to do public engagement, as I understand, can still go forward. We don't need to reconsider first and second reading unless, of course, after public engagement, people say, let's do it. The other challenge with doing a reconsideration is, as has been pointed out correctly, the prevailing side has to be someone who brings it forward. But please correct my hazy mind. I think that can only be done at the meeting immediately after, like the subsequent meeting, to then say, oh, I'd actually like to reconsider what was done at the last meeting. But if we do nothing today, as I understand it, there is still going to be public engagement in Area B. My proposal is to just put forward some additional policy proposals, because some of the confusion is the current Area B OCP says you can have one dwelling and a secondary suite. And then it's looking like, well, the change is, you can have as many dwellings as long as Vancouver Coast says it's okay, but the principal use still has to be a residence, and then you can have the secondary dwelling. So to the residents of Area B, it's essentially no change. It's just, you can have one, you can have a secondary. And in that case, the pendulum, in my opinion, now it's not swinging too far. It's not swinging enough. It's not giving us the flexibility that I've heard. So.
Thank you. I think I saw CAO's hand up, and you've raised a couple of questions. So as far as procedurally reconsidering a motion, what is our procedure on that?
Through the chair, I'd like to comment on doing engagement in Area B.
Okay.
I'd like to remind everybody that the motion was that staff be directed to hold a public information meeting in Electoral Area B to present the proposed bylaw. The proposed bylaw lost. So we've got nothing to do an engagement on. I think what Laura Rodden was expressing was that in general context, you can do engagement before or after, but not relative to the situation that we're in right now. I think we're still scratching our heads as to how we might be able to get people. Yeah, I think we're in a conundrum regarding how we can get that original May motion back to the table for any discussion, because as Director Gisborne pointed out, it should happen at the same or the next regular or special meeting of the board. And if it happened in May, that would have meant by at least June, and we're now into August.
Okay, well, I think we got the answer on that part as well. All right, what's the pleasure of the group now? Director McCormick, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a question to the CAO based on his most recent comment. When you say it should be reconsidered at the next meeting, is that a must be reconsidered, or can it be reconsidered at subsequent meetings?
Yep, CEO.
The chair, the language does say the matter may move to reconsider. So if the committee agreed, I'm sure they could bring it back. The legislation in the LGA says that the chair may bring back as well. But again, they're stipulating that it has to be within the next meeting period.
So it could still
Gisborne.
be brought forward. Yeah.
Dr. Gisborne?
Yeah, I'll happily move the motion which presents options. And I think that if we're moving a motion, even just have some policy options, that it makes it different enough than what we dealt with in May, and that we could include the May bylaw as part of that package. And we could pass that at the board, and then we can do public engagement. And then based on the public's feedback, we can go with what option the public seems interested in their public
see your hand up there.
Through the chair, this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier when Director McCormick asked the question. Since then, Director Gisborne has proposed, I think, 4 options. And what I was alluding to was that we would need at this meeting direction as to what those options were, which I think we now understand. And subsequent to that, the direction to go out and engage with the public.
Okay.
All right. I think that could be viable. And on the same token, it would address Ms. Rodden's idea about being able to do it before or after the readings of any bylaws. However, like I say, in this instance, I think the horse is far outside the barn doors right now regarding that May motion.
So to get us moving, I'll move the motion with the 4 options so that we can plus public engagement.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? I'll second the motion. Discussion?
I'll be very quick.
Brief, yes, please.
Because I think the horse has left the barn, as the CEO said, and I don't want to beat it any further. I think this motion at least gives direction to staff on a way to move forward. And I don't think we need to beat this any further, but this can at least get us moving in a forward direction. So I'm happy with it.
Very good. Director McCormick?
Thank you. I could be prepared to support this if the phrase "the proposed options" were deleted from the recommendation. I don't believe it's appropriate when you're going out for public consultation to tell people which one of these things do you like the best. I think it's better to say, what do you think should happen? And that's true public consultation, where you're listening to the range of things that come back. Coming to the public with predetermined options, I think narrows the ability of the public to respond effectively and to provide feedback that would be the most meaningful to future considerations. So I cannot support this with that in there.
Okay. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I've listened to everybody speak for almost an hour now, I think. And I'm not convinced that moving forward with the FAR and the BCR is the right way to go at this point, because I am concerned about the work level that the planning department has on their plate already. And I understand they've put forward a lot of time on this issue already. I think they did a great job of it. And I think they did more than an adequate amount of work. I think, I'm not sure how we could revisit it. If there's any way to revisit the original motion, it doesn't sound like there is, but maybe we can find a way to do it. But I'm not prepared to support this, because it would require staff to do so much more work.
Director McCormick.
Thank you. Then I would propose an amendment to the motion that's on the table. And that is to delete the 3 words with proposed options. And if there's any spelling out of what those options are. In other words, it would read to proceed with public engagement for Area B official community plan changes, and delete any reference to options.
Do I have a seconder? Director Gisborne. Discussion on the amendment. Director Brander.
I guess I'm just curious, if we don't have a bylaw going forward, what would staff would present to the public? I guess maybe that, I'm not sure who that's a question for.
Neither am I. CAO.
Through the chair, I think staff still needs some direction as to, if we're not going to be engaging the public with options, what are we engaging them with? Because it's my interpretation that Director Gisborne wants the public to at least hear about FAR and BCR, which were options. If staff do not have any more clear direction than options, then I don't know what we're taking to the public at all.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you. Yeah, the amendment is to strike out the word options, but the original motion has the 4 options listed: no change, the may change, FAR, and BCR as options. So whether the motion has the wording in it of options doesn't actually change that those are still 4 things being presented. And I think those 4 things gives the public more flexibility and ideas to respond with, rather than here's the existing OCP, here's our proposed changes, yes or no. I like, thinking outside the box, FAR, BCR, to at least get the public thinking about it. And if they are insistent on no change, or they're insistent on the may change, then that's the way we go. But I've been hearing a lot of very keen interest in Area B about FAR, and even more so these days about BCR, also in relation to what's going on up on Nootka. And I think that first step is updating the OCP, and then we can start getting into some of our zoning bylaws, because I know some of our zoning bylaws have FAR, but Nootka Street does not. And really, I think the goal here, the problem we want to solve, is residential flexibility. So that way we can, tackle this housing crisis.
Thank you. I'll just add that I agree with the CAO that I think our staff have been clear they need some meat on the bones here to engage the public. I understand Director Gisborne's explanation of some details there. And I think, we might be able to massage it by, not listing it as these 4 options only. Maybe the wording should be, with possibilities such as, and because no change is an option, So I'd like to support the motion to get the public engagement, to have some details for people so that they know what we've been talking about. And I think we'd still achieve the objective, but have those details that staff is asking us for. Director McCormick?
Question for Ms. Rodden, perhaps. If the proposed options, if those were taken out of the motion, does that still enable staff to proceed with the public engagement?
Ms. Rodden? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, through the chair, public engagement is a lot of work, and staff need to be prepared with clear messaging and clear materials that we're engaging with the public on. So when I said earlier that staff could proceed with engagement in Area B, I was referring to proceeding with engagement on the proposed amendment, which keeps getting referred to as the may change, and really what it is, it's about allowing an accessory dwelling unit. So it's about accessory dwelling units. And we're prepared to engage on that. It's in our work plan, it's in our budget. If we're engaging on these other options, we need to do research. And to be honest, I think it would have to go through the board to see whether the board supports those options before we engage with the public. And if I'm being honest, this sounds more like an OCP review and update for Area B. And that's a lot of work, and it's not in our work plan and it's not in our budget. So something else will have to come out if that's the wishes of the board.
Okay.
Area B already allows secondary suites. We don't need to update the OCP for that.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the camera here. So I see Director McCormick has her hand up.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. Thank you, Chair. So if the wording of the motion was to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area B, would that provide more direction for you in terms of public consultation?
Ms. Rodden?
Yes, very much so.
Then, Chair, I would like to amend my amendment, and that is to again, instead of deleting proposed options, but rather replace them with the phrase to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area B OCP.
CEO.
The chair, procedurally, I think we still have one amendment on the floor. I don't think you've even.
Yeah, amend the amendment.
Shouldn't you be going through? Yeah. Should you not go through the order of and level of motions?
Yes, but it's an amendment to an amendment before it's voted on.
If you want to be friendly with everybody and everybody's agreeable, I'll help speed things along.
Okay, well, I would propose that then as an amendment to the amendment, and if it's seconded, then I would speak to it.
Hold on, corporate officer.
If I may, through the chair, Director McCormick, can you, for clarity, repeat your?
Yes. So the motion would read: direct staff to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area B official community plan.
Do you have a seconder for that one?
Sure, move this along.
Okay, discussion. Director McCormick.
Thank you. And again, I'll be very quick. If this gets the public consultation directed toward a particular topic, then I think that's fair, and I could support that. So I think that including that phrase in there gives staff direction that they need and enables us to move forward from here. So that's why I support the amended amendment.
Thank you, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I would like some more clarification on it. I don't know if this amendment means that the FAR and the BCR will still be considered, which would mean a lot of staff time required. If a lot of staff time is required to do this, then I'm not in support of it. I guess that's probably Ms. Rodden that would answer that question, or Ms. Dykstra.
Yeah, Mr. Rodden, I think you've been clear on on some of that. Go ahead.
Through the chair, if the engagement is on accessory dwelling units, it's on accessory dwelling units. It's not related to FAR or BCR.
Okay, thank you.
It's a completely different concept.
Okay, see Director Gisborne.
Yeah, back in January, I had a little presentation to the planning committee, got postponed till February. It was on FAR and BCR. My understanding is it would show up in a future staff report. I haven't seen it show up really in a future staff report. We had the thing in May. I read the May OCP kind of in two ways, and it's either one way where it's just allowing secondary suites, one ADU, but that's great, but it's not needed for Area B because we already have it. Area B already allows secondary suites. So in that case, the question becomes, why the work, why the change? You know, staff time's precious. But reading that other policy, it says, you know, maximum number of dwellings is based on VCH. That gives me worry. So I want to see more residential flexibility, especially in Area B, because we do have development challenges. And we are seeing some very large houses being built in Area B. I won't single out anyone's house. But I think that if we want to be progressive, we can take into account the principles of FAR, which already exist in Area B on agricultural land reserve. They already exist on rural land from the province. And I think that we can be even more progressive with taking into consideration BCR. I think all it takes is one policy line. If it's too much work for staff, I could write it, but I didn't want to because I believe that's work for staff. Here we are in August. I think we got to get moving forward. And I think we should be getting moved forward with some kind of options so that we can swing that pendulum to have progressive housing policies to allow flexibility that can still protect the natural environment. So if the item before us is just changing the existing OCP to potentially the OCP change that was proposed in May, which we passed the resolution to say we'll do some public engagement on it. The issue I have, which I've stated before on that bylaw, is it's either doing two things. It's either allowing as many dwellings as Vancouver Coastal Health will allow, which I think is a big concern for my residents, or as we've just heard, it only allows secondary suites, which means it does nothing. And therefore, what's the point? So I think if we are going to engage with the public, it should have meaningful impact. And if it does sound like, you know, an OCP review, then let's do an OCP review. But really what I'm talking about is one line of policy in the OCP related to housing and housing flexibility. That's my stance. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, seeing no other hands, I think it is time to vote on this proposed amount. Director McCormick.
Could we have the motion put up before us so everybody is aware what we're voting on?
That's a good idea.
An amendment to the amendment.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it all here, but so we are currently voting on the amendment to the amendment, which, if I have it correct, would be the amendment to the amendment is that the motion be amended to insert the phrase regarding accessory dwelling units after engagement. And then if that amendment passes, we go back to the original amendment, which is that the motion be amended to strike out the phrases with proposed options and the second section, which includes those options. And then it would be, and insert the phrase, excuse me, sorry. Okay, so if the amendment to the amendment passes, we would go back to the original amendment, which would be this. And then if the original amendment passes, we go back to the original motion, which, excuse me if I have it here correctly, would be this public engagement. Sorry, excuse me 1 second here. Sorry, everybody. I believe this first part here is what if both amendments pass, this is what the restated motion would be. That the committee recommends to the board that the board directs staff to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area A OCP period. Is that?
No, and
Correct.
to include the last line as well, only to replace those words about options. And I'm not making any change to, or not proposing any change to the direct staff line. That should remain.
No, I think I have it in there
It's
twice.
here twice,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay.
excuse me, this bottom part was the original motion. So if both amendments pass, the motion would state that the committee recommends to the board that the board directs staff to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area B OCP. Is that the intended?
Yes. And to include the line about a public engagement.
We have a
Yes, sir.
public engagement up
All
here.
right.
Proceed with public engagement.
Okay, all right.
So if that's the intended
Yeah.
meaning, we will
Yes.
go back and we'll be voting on the amendment to the amendment, which is this one here. That the motion, the amendment, I should say, be amended to. So this is the amendment to the amendment that's currently on the floor.
Chair,
Yes,
thanks.
Director Brown.
I got the impression from Ms. Rodden that the accessory dwelling units is a completely different beast to what we're looking at today. I just would like her opinion on that. If this gives her any direction, or if we're chasing, going up a different tree now.
Ms. Rodden.
Through the chair. I think the proposed amendment to the amendment would provide clarity for staff, because that's what we're going to be engaging the public on in Area A and C as well. So we would just tailor the engagement materials to leave out the proposed bylaw that sits at second reading. But we'd be engaging on the same options and seeking feedback from the public.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up. So
Yes.
then would that, thanks, Chair. Would that require a lot of work on staff? Or are you prepared to go forward with that public engagement at this time?
Ms. Rodden.
Through the chair, we could build that engagement in Area B into our work plan. Yes, because we originally had thought we were going to be engaging in all 3 electoral areas.
Thank you.
Director Gisborne, I think I see your hand.
Yeah. Now I'm just a little confused, but that's okay. Happens. Area B's official community plan already allows ADUs and secondary suites. Area C's doesn't, but Area B's does. So if we're going to go to the public and say, hey, how do you feel about having secondary suite in the OCP? I wouldn't be surprised if Area B residents go, but we already have it. Why are you wasting our time? Like, if we're going to engage with the public and we're going to direct staff to put in the work, because staff time does take work and dealing with the public takes work, then it should be some meaningful engagement. Yes, Area C should engage with the public about secondary suites and ADUs. Their OCP doesn't have secondary suites and ADUs. And Area B already has it. When Area B was crafted, 2012, something like that, and Area C was done at the same time, but Area B has development pressures and closer to the city. So at that time, secondary suites were already there. So that's why I support, which was the original motion, to engage with the public and at least have some discussion of lot size coverage, or sorry, FAR, floor area ratio, and even BCR if we want to be really progressive when it comes to housing. Because We gotta look at our objectives as a community. And in rural areas, one of our objectives in a rural area is protecting the natural environment over the built environment. BCR allows that. And I don't think it's a surprise that BCR isn't really used in North America, and yet North America has a housing crisis. And Japan uses BCR, and they're giving away 8 million homes.
Okay. All right, well, yeah, Director McCormick.
Yeah, point of clarification, Chair. The motions before us do not say anything about secondary suites. They're talking about accessory dwelling units, which is different, quite different from secondary suites. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think it's time to put the amendment to a vote here, and we've got our proper wording, so we'll put it to vote. All those in favor of the amended amendment? All those opposed? Carried. Wow, that was a long haul.
Not done yet.
Yes, hang on a second.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, I was going to ask you to put those up again.
Thank
so
you.
we get to
Chair,
it.
so we have voted on the amendment to the amendment, which did pass. So now we are voting on the original amendment, including the amendment. So I'm going to put it up on the screen. Please. Just so.
Please.
So it's that the motion be amended to strike out the phrases with proposed options and then the big phrase, which includes the options, and insert the phrase regarding accessory dwelling units after engagement.
Okay, so what will we end up with?
And so then, thank you, Director Brander. If this amendment passes, we will be having a motion restated, which will read that the committee recommends to the board that the board directs staff to proceed with public engagement regarding accessory dwelling units for Area B official community plan.
Okay.
Now, I hate to be a stickler for rules.
Yes.
But that amendment substantially changes the intent of the original motion. It's not a minor amendment. It's like, if you don't like the original motion, vote it down and pass this motion, because they're very different.
Okay, sorry, trying to see any hands there. So corporate officer, where are we at here? We're at, does this require a motion?
So the amendment through the chair, the amendment passed. We have moved and seconded the original amendment, so we would be voting on the amendment at this time.
Any further discussion, Director Doubt?
Chair, I'm trying to be helpful here.
Yes, thank you.
What I heard Director Gisborne say is this amendment that's on the table now changes the original motion so much so as to be the opposite of the motion that he proposed. And I think he's asking the chair whether the amendment is in order because it changes the intent of his motion. I'm just trying to explain that. I'm not telling you.
I appreciate the discussion. We've gone around and around in circles and it gets confusing. So is that what you're saying, Director Gisborne, that we're a long ways away from your intended effort here?
Yeah, because now my original motion, which was public engagement with options, something I've been asking for since January, now it's August. And now with all this amendments, the motion before us is to engage with the public, essentially with the what was proposed in May, which was already voted down by the board. So the way what I'm objecting to here is the amendment before us substantially alters the motion that was put forward, which asked for options. And now this new motion essentially does the same thing that was voted down 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And that's where I'd like the chair to actually make a ruling on that, because this new amendment essentially brings us back to where we started, and I don't think it's that complicated. It doesn't need to be.
I actually tend to agree that it does not meet the intent for your motion. Corporate officer can ask you if this is out of order, where does that leave us? Gio?
Through the chair, there's been so many revisions and additions of the motion that I would suggest the best thing to do is to revert back to the original motion. And if the board wants to proceed, then vote in favor. If the board does not want to proceed, then vote it down.
Okay. Well, I think it is out of order, and after this discussion, and that we should follow that path and revert back to the original. Makes sense to me. So can we have a look at that one, corporate officer, again? Just so we're, yeah, just so we're sure. Yeah.
Yes, just give me one moment here. And I wrote down Director Gisborne's changes as they were said. So if wording needs to be adapted to better fit the motion, we can do that. But I have the exact wording that Director Gisborne put there. So.
Okay, does that look right?
Yes, it does, Chair. It looks correct to me, and it is option 1, no change, option 2, bylaw with changes as proposed at the May planning and board, and then option 3 would just be an extra policy for floor area ratio, and option 4 would be an extra policy for BCR. And then we talk to the public and see what they come back with. And that's the original intent of my motion. And I guess this odd topic I've been discussing for many months. So this motion, I think, allows us to move forward.
Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need to spell out what the options are and just not refer to the May options. I think we need to actually spell those out in the motion. So I would ask for additional information so that it's not just referring to something there, it's actually got something substantial in the motion.
Yeah. Not sorry, CAO, you've raised your hand there.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we understand what the intent is, and to expedite things, we will actually insert the language recorded from the original meetings.
Yeah, good point. All right, where are we at now? Do we require a motion for this, or no, we're already good to go?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we have a mover and a seconder. We just need to vote on the original motion.
Okay, I think we've had a lot of discussion, so we will move to the vote. All those in favor of the original motion? All those opposed? Okay, you've done the tally there. Yes?
Chair, could you say who was opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Brander and Director McCormick opposed.
And fails. Yourself as
in favor, so it fails.
In favor, yes. All right, thanks for that.
Through the chair.
Yes, CAO.
You should announce the result.
Okay, so the results of the this vote. Do I have to reference the?
No, just whether the motion failed or passed.
So the motion carried.
No.
That's what you're looking for?
No.
I wish it did.
Chair, when a vote comes to an equal for and against, it is defeated.
Oh, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Motion's defeated. I'm back on track.
So is Area B having public engagement or not? No. So then at some point, should we rescind the motion from May directing staff for public engagement?
CAO?
No, through the chair, no, because ipso facto, since the second and first reading, or the first and second reading of the bylaw didn't proceed, then there's no bylaw for the staff to engage on.
But we heard that the staff can do public engagement before first and second reading.
Through the chair?
Yes, thank you.
That was in general context.
Okay.
Not in relation to the business at hand.
So then my understanding is when members of the public ask about public engagement in Area B or about housing, because Area A and Area C is going to come up in conversation, I can let them know that the committee has decided not to do public engagement in Area B.
Well, at this time, I don't think we have the information to go to public engagement.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on here. Appreciate the discussion. I think we're only on to item number 6, if I'm correct, Corporate Officer.
Where are we?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. So we've now completed item 5.1. So we'll continue to move down. It's making point that 8.2 has already been dealt with.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any correspondence or business arising. We have a report, 8.1, and a recommendation. I'm just looking at my screen here.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Brander. It's hard to see. Do I have a seconder, Director McCormick? Thank you. Any discussion on the matter? I think I see Director Gisborne.
Yeah. I took a look through the staff report, very much enjoyed it. Happy to see that the minimum lot sizes are above the OCP minimum lots, which makes me happy. But then I noticed something. And it appears that the subdivision would create 2 lots, but those lots essentially straddle the road. They go on both sides of the road. That causes me a pause for some concern because, as we know, Ministry of Transportation is the final deciding, body about subdivisions. Mm-hmm. And when there is a parcel that exists on both sides of a provincial right-of-way, usually as time goes on, eventually the Ministry of Transportation might go, look, why are you both sides of the road? Let's just split those into 2 lots because, running water lines and infrastructure across the road is usually not something they're too interested in. So that's where I have some reservations, because then what that could lead to is 4 lots rather than 2. And then those 4 lots would be below the minimum lot size. So I'm a little hesitant, but at this time, if I do this, I can support the resolution, but having lots that are created on both sides of the road, because at first I thought, oh, they're going to subdivide, one lot off from the other. So one's on one side of the road and one side's at another, like we had out at Lambert's in Paradise Valley, because, that case was unique because it turned out the property owned the road. But this one's a little different, but I can potentially see an issue in the future. Yeah, that's my thoughts. So I'm kind of
just maybe Mr. Rodden, any comments on that concern with the road going down the middle there?
Through the chair, it's very common. All the adjacent lots are hooked lots as well. We see it many areas in the regional district. Mm-hmm. Okay. We have no policies
right
opposed to that.
Okay, thank you. Just looking for any other hands at the table there. Seeing none, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor? I don't know if you can see my hand. I can't see any of you now. I can just see Ms. Rodden. There we go. Okay. I didn't see if that carried. I believe it did.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Hard to keep track here. 8.2. We've dealt with. 8.3, the public hearing report for Texada Island Community Watershed 582. Director McCormick, do I have a seconder? Discussion first, Director McCormick?
Well, no, I just note that it's a 2-part motion.
Yes.
So if following procedure, then I would move part 1.
Thank you, seconder. Dr. Gisborne, thank you. Discussion? Dr. McCormick?
Thank you. I have one quick question to staff, and that is to refresh my memory from when we were reviewing the OCP a couple of years ago. And that is with regard to the language change regarding the mining. And the question that was raised at the public hearing from one resident who was asking that the language from the 1993 bylaw be added back to the new bylaw to ensure that contaminants from mines are addressed. And did we make that change because the regulations are now in the provincial domain, so it isn't necessary for us to do that?
Good question.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Through the chair, yes, Director McCormick, that's correct. It's outside the scope of local government authority.
But that the check and balance then for contaminants from mines is included in provincial legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. I think I see Director Gisborne.
Yes, you do. I got one question about policy 7.3. It's on page 19 of the 23-page report, and it has to do with the agricultural zone, section 7. And it reads, no more than one residential dwelling shall be permitted on a parcel unless otherwise permitted or exempt under the Agricultural Land Commission Act and regulation. And the reason that makes me scratch my head is a couple of years ago, the Ministry of Agriculture came out and allowed secondary dwellings on ALR, but no more than 90 square meters. But it also said that local government could restrict whether or not you can have that secondary suite. And I know we just had a whole lot of conversation about secondary suites and the importance they have in our area. So what I'm wondering is, does policy 7.3 prohibit that secondary dwelling? Or does the provincial government's allowance of the secondary dwelling, but they also did put in that caveat that local government could restrict it? So my question then becomes, can an ALR parcel owner have a secondary suite, or would they be out of compliance with the zoning bylaw?
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
The motion before us is to accept the public hearing report. I don't believe the questions have any relevance to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
That's quite a good point.
I will just put a pause on that for the next part.
Thanks. I wondered where you were going with that. Okay, I don't see any other hands. We put the first part to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Don't see any. Okay, part 2. Do we have a mover?
Yes.
Dr. McCormick, seconder. Dr. Gisborne, thank you. Discussion. Okay, finish up. Go ahead.
Same question.
Okay, Ms. Rodden.
Sorry. Through the chair, regulation 7.3 in the zoning bylaw, I think is clearly stated. No more than one residential dwelling is permitted unless it's otherwise permitted or exempt under the Provincial ALC Act and regulation. So if it meets the ALC Act and regulation, then it would be permitted.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, because I think that's where I got a little confusion, because when the ministry changed that for the secondary dwelling, they said local government could restrict the secondary dwelling. But just hearing from our planner where it says unless otherwise permitted, from the sounds of it, a farmer or ALR property owner over there could have a secondary dwelling, so long as it's under the 90 square meter requirement. So that's good to know. That makes me happy. And then I guess the one last question I have is, because this zoning bylaw has a effect on agricultural land reserve, land designations. I'm just wondering, is after this planning committee moves forward on this item, will this be forwarded to the Agricultural Advisory Committee for review, as it is a zoning bylaw that impacts and or restricts agricultural land more so than what the ALR Act already does restrict? I'm just wondering if there's going to be a Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Sorry, is that something for the CAO maybe, or Ms. Rodden? I was wondering if that was part of the plan.
Yeah, through the chair, I think Laura Rodden is prepared to answer that right now.
Okay, Ms. Rodden.
Yes, through the chair. The agricultural zone regulations have not changed from the current bylaw that was adopted 30 years ago, with just some minor tweaking. There's no real changes. So no, we saw no need to refer it to the Ag Advisory Committee.
Okay. I'm just looking, any other hands here? Nope, seeing none, we'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor? Good, this motion is carried. Thank you. Where are we? New business? I don't see any.
Hey, Chair.
Yes.
I would like to move that item 8.3 part 2 be forwarded to tomorrow's Agricultural Advisory Committee.
I'll second that.
And a very brief discussion.
There's
an Agricultural Advisory Committee tomorrow. I presume that there won't really be much input from them on this item, but they are a committee of experts that know a lot about farming and a whole lot more than I do. So I think just an extra set of eyes might be good in case there's something that pops out in relation to agriculture. And I think tomorrow's Agricultural Advisory Committee only has one item on the agenda, so it shouldn't be too onerous. So my motion is to just forward it to them.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think information is good for them, and see no reason not to share. So any other comments, Director McCormick?
No, thank you. I saw Ms. Rodden's hand up, but I'll ask
I'm sorry.
my question, and it seems to me that it isn't necessary and could be setting a precedent whereby we're referring watershed or zoning bylaw changes to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and I'm concerned if we're going to set a precedent that take place. So I'd be interested in Ms. Rodden's comment on that.
Ms. Rodden?
Thank you. I was raising my hand because Ms. Dykstra had a comment.
Oh, okay. Ms. Dykstra.
Thank you, through the chair. The corporate officer or CEO could correct me, but if you refer it to a committee after public hearing, I believe you have to rescind the public hearing and post notice of a new public hearing under the Local Government Act for new information to be received to the board after public hearing.
Oh, if that's the case, I withdraw the motion.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for the clarification. All right. So where are we? New business. We've gone through that. Any other hands? No. Question period. Do we have the media or anyone online? We went till I don't hear anyone. Okay. Well, if they pop online, then we might give them a shot here before we finish out. No proposed closed session. One more second, and thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Yeah, marathon.
Just in time for our finance committee.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. See you in a while.